You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
If your competitive advantage is your low price, you're a commodity. And commodities make no money. And pricing power, pricing power was a term that was coined by Warren Buffett in 2010. And what he said was that his most important criterion to invest in a business is whether the business has pricing power or not. And then he continued to define what he meant with that. And he said, pricing power is the ability to increase prices without losing sales volume.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning. This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening and or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, I want to take you back, way back into time, about 30 years back. Man. In the 1900s, as the kids say. Oh man, that stuff was in the 1900s. I know we're in the 40s, right? But so in the 1900s, 1900 and probably 98, around that time, one of my biggest fears in business was pricing. I moved from...
You froze. I don't know if there's an issue with the technology or whether you got a bad internet connection or...
Sorry, technology glitch.
Yeah, you froze.
First business was construction, and we started in commercial construction, and in the commercial field, there was like a blueprint. As a subcontractor, there was only about so much that you can charge per square foot. So I didn't have to worry about pricing. I didn't have to, because everything was there. What made us stand out as subcontractors is we had all of our paperwork. So it was really about an insurance or paperwork game. The money was going to be the money. So that was my introduction to business. But when we moved from the commercial space to home improvement space, where we started, you can do a kitchen. I'm only going to use a little bit of money, so you can't do a kitchen for these prices. But let's say customer A only has $150. Customer B has $20. Customer C has $100. But you can do a kitchen in all those price ranges. It's just the amenities in that kitchen and how the kitchen, the functionality of the kitchen, and all of these things. So I had to learn pricing. And the other thing is, when you have these blockers, when you're talking about now calling the customer and saying, hey, Ms. Smith, yes, yeah, I was there at your house earlier, and I'm a young man, I came with my dad, yeah, price is going to... You get nervous because you're bidding, and who wants to be rejected because of price? So now you make all of these concessions. Oh no, but oh man, Miss Smith comes back and says, oh wow, I was really thinking about this. I can probably do that price because everything is a negotiation. You're always negotiating. But do you think that can give me this? Do you think, and me being this sophomoric dude that's afraid of making money, oh yes, yes, we can do it. Oh, you need towels too? Oh, you want to change that? Thanks, Miss Smith, we can do it. Because I was really more intrigued with getting the job and not really standing on my price. I would tell Miss Smith some years later, pick rocks, because this is what this costs, this is what that is cost. And we itemized. My grandfather left South Carolina when he was 17 years old. He was uneducated, and he was born in a place that was a Geechee land, but they were called what was called bond slaves. So you stayed there, you could stay at the house, but you had to work. So you worked for your boarder, you worked for your food, and he told me early on in business, he wasn't a businessman, he worked, he was a worker, he was very hard worker, never missed a day of work. And he will tell you that every time you go to his house, I never missed a day of work. Except for one day when your aunt jammed me up and I had to leave half the day and had to go to court. That was his story. But he always said to me, and this made sense as I grew in business, he said, never take the package. Always tell them to itemize the bill. So what do you mean, Grant? What's in the package? He said, oh, I'll give you the bundle. No, I don't want the bundle. Itemize the bill. Show me what I'm getting. And put a price next to it. Now, me, knowing it all, I didn't listen to Grandpa's advice until later on in business. And you know what I realized? Wow, Grandpa was right. And then we sit you at the field of the masters and we're talking about pricing. Somebody who may be listening may not understand this, or may be having the same battle or dilemma. Pierre, how are you, sir?
Thank you. Interesting stories.
Well, we like to share stories and share how we overcome these things, because our goal is not just to be transparent, because we can be transparent about foolishness, but we want to leave actionable steps that people can take. They call you the price whisperer. How did you gain reputation?
The story here, if you like, is that I ran a couple of companies in Europe, and I came here to the US in the mid-90s, established and run a division of a fairly large public company. And after that, I had another 4 CEO jobs. In all these instances, we did experiments with pricing. And some of those experiments was very successful, meaning that next quarter revenues were up 25-30%. Others were complete duds. And what I had learned in business school about pricing was theoretical and academic, that it was really useless information. So it didn't help us in any way to understand why some of those experiments worked or not. And so what I did when I started my own company, when I decided I couldn't stand having a boss of any kind anymore. And so I started my own company, and I took that interest in pricing, and I developed a process to make every pricing experiment a success. And that has then led me to, I do a lot of writing. I have a new book out about pricing, which the subtitle is A Holistic Approach to Pricing Power. I do a lot of interviews. I have a YouTube channel, and of course I have almost 1,000 happy customers. I've become one of the world's leading experts on how you price a product or a service. And I should say that how you price to maximize growth, sales volume, and profitability.
One of my first lessons from a coach in business, I needed coaching because I realized I was a little rough around the edges, everything. one of the things they said, price cannot be a competitive advantage. What would you say to that?
No, I think absolutely right. Price, then you're a commodity. If your competitive advantage is your low price, you're a commodity. And commodities make no money. And pricing power, pricing power was a term that was coined by Warren Buffett in 2010. And what he said was that his most important criterion to invest in a business is whether the business has pricing power or not. And then he continued to define what he meant with that. And he said, pricing power is the ability to increase prices without losing sales volume. And the way you gain pricing power is differentiators from your competition that the buyers in your market are willing to pay higher prices for, right? But it's also right, if I have to comment on what you said there about itemized bills, that is actually opposite to best practice. You should not have or offers itemized in too much detail, because that opens a can of worm of negotiations. Your clients will say, oh, I can see this item, and I know that this item is 25% lower in price if I buy it somewhere else. So you need to meet that price. But if you sell a bundle, the client doesn't know what the price for each of the item is, so you can actually have a higher price.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you pointed that out, because when you're doing business, sometimes you may have a deal with the manufacturer that's giving you something at a lower rate, and you don't want to have that rate seen in the bill.
No, definitely not. And what you're referring to is cost plus pricing. And so you use your cost as a reference for how you price. And that's something you should never do. Imagine that, and this is such a common mistake. There's oodles and oodles of companies that make these mistakes. Tiny startups to Fortune 50 companies. They price based on their cost. And so and let me just give you a made-up example, I may say. Let's say that your cost is $50 for whatever you're selling. And your strategy of cost plus pricing is to double your cost. So your price becomes 100. Now, assuming that you got a big deal, you got a deal from your vendor, so suddenly that product that used to be $50 are now $40. And because you're using that same uplift of doubling the cost, your price now is 80. But you just shot yourself in the foot. Because when the price was 50, you were making $50 in profit margin. When the price was 40, you are making $40 in profit margin. And you just lost $10.
And that's in terms of your negotiation. One of the lessons that I learned, I was asked the question in the same coaching class. They gave an example, and then I'll let you break this down because I really want to tap into your brain. Said there's 3 apartments for rent. One apartment is, again, I like to use low numbers. One apartment is $1.50. The other apartment is $1.75. How much would you price your apartment for? And I went in between, let's say $150, $2. I said, all right, so I guess $175. And the answer was no. And they said, add amenities and price your apartment to $3 because you're giving more for the buck. And it revolutionized my thought processes. Is this the same kind of revolutionary mindset shift that you went through?
Yeah, it's all about understanding those differentiators, understanding what customers are willing to pay higher prices for. And there's psychology behind prices. And what I mean with that is that if you price yourself too low, buyers or potential buyers will say to themselves, I want to buy this, but at this price, it can't be any good, so I won't. And we've all been there. Yeah. You've been there. I've been there. Want to buy something, and then you look at the price and you say, this can't be any good. This is going to be a piece of crap. I'm not going to buy it. And then you go and buy something in the same category from another vendor that is more expensive and expensive enough so that you don't get that feeling of it's too cheap, but not so high that you don't think you can afford it.
Or you getting big.
And what I'm saying with that is that the right price is a balance point. Not too low and not too high. Okay? But then, if we look at it from the next point of view, different groups of potential buyers have different balance points. Okay? So, and just here you can see that if you look around, I live in a city in the Los Angeles area called Woodland Hills. And if I want to go down to what's called the West Side or Los Angeles proper, we go over a hill. So there's a little mountain range and we drive over that mountain range. So the term here is either side of the hill. And if you're an attorney, if you're on my side of the hill, your fees are whatever your fees are. If you're on the other side of the hill, your fees are double.
And they literally call it the other side of it. It's in what we call living on the other side of the tracks. The train.
Yes.
The train track.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So the only difference is that if you're on one side of the hill, your prices are twice as high as if you're on the other side of the hill. But there's no difference in the service. It is just the perception of value.
So does that tap into the psychology of buying?
That's only psychology.
Because if I asked my son, I try to give him lessons. I said, we take 3 pair of jeans. They all look alike. And then one is sold for, again, I'm going to use little numbers. One is sold for $1. And then the other one is sold for $2. But they kind of designer jeans. But then we have these exclusive jeans that sold for $100. Why do you think a person would pay for the $100 jeans? And it took him, I didn't give him an answer. I mean, every day he would come back with a different answer. But eventually I was like, no, some people just want to pay to be the only one that have them.
That's exactly right. It's the level of exclusivity. And price is one of the main reasons why luxury goods are luxury goods.
That's the only thing they can luxury.
Because if everybody could afford, say, if everybody could afford Rolex watches, there will be no luxury in Rolex watches. And in fact, on that topic, about a dozen years ago, there was a Swiss watchmaker that they made a series of watches built from iron that had been recovered from the Titanic. And they priced those watches at $375,000 a pop. And they sold out the series in 2 weeks. I am absolutely serious. So it wasn't expensive enough, right? For the 10 or whatever 50,000 billionaires there are in the world.
You know, my first partner, I call him my dad, took me out into the project. So he had to train me in some stuff. And one of the first things he said is that people like to brag about how much they spent on that. They'll invite people over.
That happens.
Yeah. To say, oh man, I spent $15,000 on this television, just to show, when you break down the psychology of pricing, Mr. Price Whisperer, what part of is that from the ego? Is that from, and then how do you break this down to your clients and customers so that they can know if their products, goods, or services fall in line with those criteria? Because every product, good, and services has to fall in line with a certain level of psychology.
Definitely. And it's really about the perception of value. And part of that perception of value is, if we're talking about consumer goods, especially, is that you want to buy this consumer goods because you have a need to project something. You have a need to tell the world about something based on what you bought. You have a need to, how shall I say, to buy something to show that you belong to a certain group of many people that have similar opinions or similar interests, right? Your hat, you're using that hat to send a message that you belong to a group of people who follow a certain sports team and so forth. And that's your message.
Never looked at it that way.
Right? So for you, there's value because it gives you get a belonging. You know that you're in the group and other people with the similar hats, and you know that they're in the same, they have the same preferences and they have the same interests, right? So you belong to a group.
How important, before that, because my time with you is almost done, I think this is the most important thing. When did you know that you was the Price Whisperer? What was it?
Oh, I knew, knew exactly what happened. I was in a fairly large networking group here in Los Angeles, and for many years, I was called the pricing guy, until one of the guys who call themselves the pitch whisperer, he said, he's very good. So he said, no, you're not the pricing guy. You are the price whisperer.
What's your criteria of setting the price, though? So you're hearing a product, you're in this group, and I didn't want to first cut you, but this is I think I'm the podcast whisperer. But you're in this group, and you're sitting around and you're hearing people's ideas. What starts to happen as you formulate, okay, this should be, like, what's your criteria? What's your formula?
I'll tell you what the process is, and the process is to go out and do something called value research. Value research is it's online market research on steroids. And if value research is done right, you'll be able to predict sales volume and revenue at precise price points for a product or a service. And that could be a product or service that are being sold either B2B or B2C. And it is then to understand what makes the market, what makes the buyers increase their desire to buy and increase their desire to pay.
So would that be similar to the after repair value price on a piece of real estate?
No, real estate is often driven by something else. Real estate is often driven by the expectations of profits to be made.
All right. So
yeah.
And how do you get the psychology? How do you? What? I don't want to know your secret source, but how can you tell that this cup is going to be worth X amount of dollars in the long run? Is it like,
you can do that in this value research, and it's something that really works all the time. But I can tell you a hint of what maybe smaller companies can do or what startups can do, right? And that is to go out. Pricing all needs to be driven by what buyers are willing to pay. And talk about your hat. That same hat with maybe the signature of one of the players, you are going to be willing to pay higher prices, right? Because it means something more to you. But the way you can do this is you go into your marketplace, whatever that marketplace is, and you find 25 potential buyers at least. And then what you do is that you ask them two questions, and phraseology here is important. You ask them one question. First, you describe your product or your service, and specifically what makes you different than the next guy. And then you ask the question, at what price is the price so low that you believe we are over-promising and going to under-deliver, and for that reason you are not making a purchase, right? And then you say, and now let's look at the flip side. Let's assume that we are under-promising and we are going to over-deliver, and our product or service is going to be better than you can ever imagine. What is still a price that is so high that it will prevent you from buying?
So you're allowing the customers.
So when you, let me finish. So when you ask this to 25 potential buyers, you average the two answers, the two low answers and the two high answer. And now you have the range of where your prices should be. Not below that price and not above that price.
But the market kind of sets the price range instead of you trying to figure it out.
No, the market doesn't set the price. You can live.
Or the research. Would you phrase that? Is it the research? Is it the customer? Because you're asking the customers and they're giving you some historic or some feeling on pricing, and then you're taking so who's giving you the data? Is it the customer? Is it the question?
It is in this case, it is the customer. And I'm rather saying buyer because customers is a little wider, but these people that I'm suggesting that you talk to, they need to be completely new people. They cannot be your current customers. They cannot be your prospects. They can certainly not be your friends and family. They need to be completely new people that fits the profile roughly of your customers.
Now, I want to dive into the difference between customers and buyers because you're the master, and I want to, I may have to repurpose my language, and that's why we're sitting down. I want to frame our conversation around the words that you use because words are powerful. What's the difference between a customer and a buyer?
It really has to do with you can have buyers and non-buyers. Whereas customers in most people's mind are everybody that could be a customer, including some that are customers.
Yes.
So by making sure that we use the term buyer and non-buyer, as opposed to using a more generic term as customers, we narrow down the definition.
So because in marketing they call that would be like a long tail. Like these people are buying from me. So when we do this type of research, we want to make sure that these are buyers because a customer is on the fence anyway. They don't know if they even though the phrase the customer is always right, but this person didn't convert to a buyer, so they were okay. Right. See, I learned something that I'm going to use. Good. When I'm listening to all of the years of experience, to all of the years of knowledge that you have, you are very distinctive in your words, which is words are powerful, and meticulous in your definitions or in your processes. How many, I don't want to say how many years, how long did it take you to get these systems in place through trial and error? And when did you start calculating that you were developing these systems?
I started 18 years ago. That's when I founded my company. And it took maybe, from a high level point of view, it took maybe a month to develop the process. And then 2 months later, we had our first client. And then, of course, we refined these over time. So what we do now is far more sophisticated than what we did in the early days. But I would say that even the very first customer got tremendous value from the work because we did something different.
If you were sitting down in front of the students at, let's say, a local college or just a local assembly, and you were breaking down your systems and you were going to send them out to do it, is it something that can be learned, taught, and rescinded, or is it something that if you're not around, it is not duplicatable?
There's certain intellectual properties in what we do, and in my company, some 12 years ago, we developed a piece of AI software that supports the process, but nobody is not replaceable. And everything can be learned. So that I don't think is a problem. But I want to backtrack a little bit, and this is also really for the audience. One of the key things that the companies often make a mistake in is to understand in what business they are, right? And I can start with paraphrasing a gentleman called Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker he's been dead now for 15 years, but he is being called the father of modern management. And one thing that he said, he wrote a lot of books, and his writing is actually very interesting. But he said, companies find it very difficult to understand why their buyers buy or not. Right? It's very difficult for a company to understand why you get the business or you don't get the business. And then he continued to say, customers don't buy a quarter-inch drill. They buy a quarter-inch hole. Right? So it's the outcome that they expect that drives the buyers, right? And this is also, that also makes it very important to know what business you're in. And I want to make another short story here. A couple of years ago, I read, and since we talked about watches and Rolex, I read an interview with the CEO of Rolex. And the journalist asked him to make a statement about the Swiss watch industry, to which he replied, I don't know. We are not in the watch industry. They're in the lifestyle industry.
And he knew his market.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at Red Bull. They are in the extreme sports business. And the way they monetize that is to sell a sugary drink.
Wow. This has been, listen, I told you guys we set you at the feet of the masters. You just heard a masterclass from the Price Whisperer, as he's even made me start to think about, what business am I in? Because when you say, all right, this is what I do, but that is just because that's what you do, that does not mean that's your business. What business are you in?
That's right.
See, I was sharp. You teach me, I got you. Name the book again one more time so that the people can.
Oh, the book is also called The Price Whisperer.
All right.
And the subtitle is A Holistic Approach to Pricing Power. This is available on Kindle and on
So
Audible
if
as
you're
well.
listening, the description for the book is the link for the book is in our description. Plus, there's a link in the description is going to be his name and the title of our thing, and it's going to be a line under it. You hit that, and it'll take you directly to the website so that you can get that book. If you're struggling and understanding not just your pricing, and as you see the brilliant mind of the whisperer working, it's not just your pricing. You might need to even rephrase your industry, because you may be telling people, sending out the right message to the wrong people. And that's what happens if you're misplaced. You're sending out the right message, but you're not sending it to the right people. My last question for you, what books have influenced you, or do you recommend? They could be fiction, nonfiction, something that you read years ago, doesn't have to be innocent.
I think that the most influential book I've read, there's two of them actually, I would say. One is it's called the Crossing the Chasm. This is a business book, and it's written by a guy called Jeffrey Moore. And it is all about how you go in a company from being an early stage company to becoming a mainstream company. And most companies fail that. And he said that is because there is a chasm. And crossing that chasm is very difficult.
I'm writing this book down.
That I found incredibly interesting. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma by a gentleman called something Christensen. And what he talks about is how whole industries are disappearing because they only talk to their customers, not their market, right? And I don't know how tech savvy you are.
A little bit. So I can say answer the door real quick. I can say it.
Sure.
You stop. I can still hear you. It's hard for these distractions. Yeah. What are you saying then?
No, what he does is that he examines the computer hard disk industry. Nowadays, we don't have hard disks in our computers any longer, but we had. And what he's saying, and I've been in the hard disk industry myself, and hard disk industry goes in generations. And the very first generation of hard disks were these giant things, and they were connected to mainframe computers. And the manufacturers of these disks, they talked to the customers who had mainframe computer and said, is there anything else you want? And they say no. And then there was a next generation disks that came out, and next generation technology became available, and because all these companies making these large disks for mainframes only talk to the buyers of mainframes, so they completely missed that there was a new generation coming out. And in fact, if we go generations here, for 6 generations of these hard disks, from the mid-50s to somewhere in the mid-70s, not a single manufacturer managed to survive the generation change. They all went bust because they did not listen to the market. They only listened to their customers.
Wow.
So The Innovator's Dilemma is a great book.
It's another, I'm writing it.
And again, it teaches you why you need to listen to not only those who buys your product or service, but also those who don't buy, and those that doesn't even know you exist, complete strangers, but that fit the profile of somebody who could buy your product or service.
The last one again. The Innovator's book. The name of the book.
Oh, the book is called The innovator's dilemma.
Yep, innovator's dilemma.
Old Christiansen. I can't remember his first name now.
Well, there you have it, everyone. I told you that we sit you at the feet of the masters, and we have just had a masterclass here. Again, the link to the book is in the description. Go and get a copy of that book. It's going to help you. The more you read, it expands the mind. And you know that we don't walk making excuses. We don't want to walk anymore looking at customers and not.
You want to look at buyers or non-buyers?
And non-buyers, because when we start looking at buyers and non-buyers, then we can join the victory walk. And here you are, we're part of this Walk in Victory family. We only ask that you hit and subscribe and that you tell somebody else about our podcast so that we can continue to grow listeners like you. If you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please do hit that 5-star, leave a comment, and it helps us to get these messages out to more people that think like us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Don't walk with your head down. We walk in victory. Peace.
All right. Thank you very much. And I hope this was interesting for the audience.